me dorta hirna gan all nefra corfoin. Con sin asturd an organ ever, agus narta grasta of ronoring. Choni the chort hun crehe, agus goruite a husno far or a nil avor, agus or nil a gurnea fasta, agus go trade the correct no for read, tre Christ art here na amen. Direct we beseech thee, O Lord, our actions by thy holy inspirations, and carry them on by thy gracious assistance, that every word and work of ours may always begin from thee and by thee be happily ended. Through Christ our Lord. Amen. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and people in the gallery. I will now take leaders' questions under Standing Order 38. Deputy Mary Lou MacDonald.
Taoiseach, the Credit Union Consumer Sentiment Report for April has been published, and it lays bare the severity of the cost of living pressure on people, especially when it comes to soaring energy costs. It reveals that a third of consumers expect to cut energy just to get by, while 9 out of 10 consumers fear that high energy costs will force them to cut back on household spending. The reality is that working people and families are struggling to stay afloat. A record number of households can't pay their electricity bill. 1 in 4 can't pay their gas bills, and now they brace themselves for further electricity price hikes in the coming weeks. And workers and families are really worried about the time ahead. Yet they see your government refusing to listen, seemingly incapable of understanding the pressure they're under. Last October, you wanted people to believe that this was all over, and you couldn't have been more wrong. Since then, your response has been all over the place. You've scrambled around, taken a scattered approach, doing a bit here and a bit there, but never showing the leadership required to truly grasp this crisis. What was needed from government was quick, decisive action to provide people with real relief, to give working households certainty for the time ahead. However, it's only when public anger grows that you move. Twice you have come to the table, twice you have gotten it badly wrong, half measures each time, never prepared to go far enough. You've left people to struggle on, to make do, and even when anger boiled into protest, you still failed to understand people's lives. Workers and families can't take this anymore, Taoiseach. They can't wait any longer. We need an emergency budget. And we've set out clearly what needs to be done, solutions that cut to the heart of the pressure people are under. We need energy credits for households, a €500 payment for people with disabilities, a suite of measures to protect the most vulnerable, and there must be relief for workers. Remember, your budget last October left them worse off. You'll remember introducing the USC, Taoiseach. It was brought in by Fianna Fáil when you crashed the Irish economy. It's a constant drag on people's wages, and even more so during this cost of living crisis. So we propose a permanent USC cut that puts €500 back into workers' pockets. These are practical steps that can be taken right now to make a real difference, to lift some of the pressure people are under to make ends meet. Caithfí Fianna Fáil agus Fine Gael dúsig suas agus dóireacht ggéircéim an costas marachtála a hiiscint. Níor leor leathíocht. Tá caisnéis éigeandáil ag tasú loire chun faoisimh ceart a thabhairt d'oibrithe agus the Chowley. Taoiseach, expecting households to cling on until next year's budget is not only unfair, it's downright insulting, because this cost of living crisis is happening now. The stress is at kitchen tables now in this time, and you need to do your job. You need to act to make life more affordable. Your government has a surplus of billions. A fraction of that would make a real difference. So bring forward an emergency budget. Finally listen, give workers and families the proper relief they deserve?
Taoiseach to respond.
Well, first of all, I acknowledge that because of the war in the Middle East, which you somehow managed not to mention, which is a war that has created shocking constraints in terms of both oil supply and has led to an increase in fuel prices across the world. Globally, people are very concerned about what they see as the biggest shock to the energy sector in many a time. They're saying it is bigger than 73, 79 combined, and even 73, 79, 1973, 1979, and 2022 combined. So it's a very, very serious shock to the energy system that has been brought about here, which has dramatically increased prices and will result in a global contraction of fossil fuel supplies, with consequential impacts in terms of other products like fertiliser and helium and so on, which could have impacts on jobs and which could have impacts on food production across the world. And these are very, very serious issues that we're all facing. And we acknowledge fully that this is creating pressures on families and on households. No question about that. There is an uncertainty about it as well, because we don't quite know when this is going to end, when the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz is going to end, which is key to getting prices down and getting supply reactivated again to a significant degree. You haven't referenced any of that. It's as if it doesn't exist in your world. But those are the realities facing every government across the world right now. And yes, from our perspective in the budget, we majored very heavily on housing, on infrastructure, on disability with a 20% increase, and on child poverty in terms of the support payments for children going up substantially on record levels for over 12, 16 years and under 12, under less than that, but still record levels both ways. And then we did the extension of the family fuel allowance to bring in the working family payment and those on it, which brought in an extra 50,000. About 26% of people now are on the fuel allowance. And that was a measure that does help people deal, not comprehensively, but at least it's a contribution to people to take pressure off them in respect of rising fuel prices. And we have announced a 750 million package, over 750 million actually, which has brought down the excise duty by about 32 cents on diesel and about 27 cents on petrol. So those measures affect and help everybody. And today the government approved two very specific packages for the transport haulier sector, which is much more expanded than was the case during COVID-19 or during the Ukrainian energy crisis, and also farmers, fishers, contractors. And these are very, very substantial schemes. And remember that about 240,000 workers are involved in the haulage logistics industry. I know you described them last week as a sectional thing and that we're only looking after particular sectors. But it's key to everybody, all workers, that we can get goods to port, get them exported at an affordable price, that we can get goods on our supermarket shelves at an affordable price. So when we alleviate the pressure on hauliers and logistics and supply, we're alleviating pressures on everybody. And likewise in terms of food production. So we're not scattered all over the place. This was strategic to deal with food production. This is a critical period in terms of food. We're a big food producing country, and it is right that we should alleviate the pressures on farmers, in particular around the food production area, on contractors.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
As
Deputy
well,
MacDonald to respond.
in terms of the role that they
Deputy
play
MacDonald,
in terms
please.
of food production.
There was a cost of living crisis before the war on Iran. More than 300,000 households were already in energy arrears. So this has very, very deep roots, this crisis. You failed to acknowledge that. Your budget last October left workers worse off and left people with disabilities worse off. You fail to acknowledge that. Families and workers are really, really struggling, Taoiseach, and you have no response for them except to talk down to them, except to dismiss them. I have asked you to introduce an emergency budget. I have said to you the very, very specific measures that we in Sinn Féin believe that need to be taken: energy credits, supports, including a disability payment, and critically, a permanent cut in respect of the USC. These are the things that need to happen if you are to be serious about assisting people in a time of crisis. Are you serious? Are you listening?
Tá rialtas dáir a fin geisio, agus tá anna chuid déinte an rialtas ó thaobh costas marachtála ní léon áras sin an méad atá déinte going son Gallagher agus an Conor Sinéis a bhí going Secata agus an blion River sin. Deputy, what you've outlined is something for everybody. Everybody. It could be 4 or 5 billion in terms of what you announced. You didn't cost it. I think it's about 3.5 billion. You say that, but say what is the cost? I'd say this is around 5 billion. You will. The bottom line is here: we have spent 700. We've allocated 750 million already, and there's a budget in October, and it's about time. You know, we need to also bear in mind in terms of how best we target the resources we have. We don't have money in the bottom of a drawer like you're suggesting. Much of that surplus is in the Future Ireland Fund and is in the Infrastructure Nature Fund, unless you're advocating we take it out of the funds. So you need to clarify that. But that money has been put aside, and a lot of it is being invested in the economy, in jobs and in housing right now.
Deputy Ivana Bacik.
Taoiseach, this time last year, households were already labouring under the pressure of grocery price inflation, the housing crisis and Trump's threatened tariffs. Since the outset of Trump's illegal war on Iran and in the Middle East, and with no end in sight to Russia's bombardment of Ukraine, things have got worse. And you've rightly just described the situation we're in as a massive global energy shock. But in this shock, struggling households are left wondering when they will get some real reprieve from your government. PAYE workers are not seeing the benefit of a multi-million euro sectoral support package. Taoiseach, in response to my Labour colleague Jed Nash's question last week, the Taoiseach ruled out a mini-budget for our communities. Today, we're told that officials are scrambling to design one-off supports, retrofit grants, energy tweaks, all signs pointing to a sort of mini-budget. As the saying goes, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it might just be a duck. But in this case, a very lame duck, Taoiseach. Very lame, because what we're seeing is not a coherent plan. You talk about a strategic response. Where's the strategy in the series of ad hoc measures you're formulating? They appear to be cobbled together in response to political pressure. To borrow another animal metaphor, you're playing whack-a-mole. You've no clear vision for how to support working families through this deepening cost of living and energy crisis. Would it not be more honest to call your response what it is, a mini-budget but released in segments? Call it what it is, let people then judge it on its merits. Families are already stretched to breaking point. You know there are more than 320,000 households in arrears on electricity, 180,000 behind on gas bills, highest levels on record. Homeless figures, highest on record. Grocery prices rising week on week. Insurance, housing, education costs all up. And what has your government done? You've withdrawn energy credits without putting any cushion in place for households. You've failed to index tax bans, as Labour had sought. You've left PAYE workers footing the bill for sectoral payoffs and VAT cuts. There's no evidence they will achieve anything other than costing the exchequer. And now, as inflation threatens to surge again, the finance minister is kite flying. So, Taoiseach, people see through this. They see a government that can find €750 million for sectoral supports while telling households to tighten their belts. They hear your talk of tax breaks on wealth, and they're struggling to find the money to cover food and heating costs at the end of the month. And that's why your approach is so frustrating. If you're doing a mini-budget in all but name, why not bring forward a coherent package? Why not take the options that we've proposed? A windfall tax on excess energy profits of big companies, a renewables revolution to end reliance on fossil fuels, targeted energy credits for working households and indexation of tax bans. Systemic change, not just token measures. Taoiseach, why won't you just introduce a mini-budget, a coherent package that gives support to struggling households?
Taoiseach, please.
First of all, we will not be introducing a mini-budget. And could I say to you at the outset that we have taken the strategic approach to this. The most fundamental approach we should take is an understanding of the impacts of this, not just the immediate impacts of this, but the medium term impacts on our overall economic life, in terms of the impact on jobs, potentially, in terms of the impact on prices and so on. So we've announced 750 million. There is general relief in terms of the reductions in excise duty on diesel and petrol, which benefits POE and all workers and everybody who uses their car and so forth. And then there's a targeted approach in terms of families on low incomes, in terms of the extension, as we did, of the fuel allowance. And then in terms of food production and everything to do with food production, and also in terms of the broader haulage, logistics, supply industry, which is critical for all of us. Now, that is being strategic, because we're an exporting island, small island. We export 90% of what we produce. And so it's essential that the logistics, supply chain, haulage is enabled to do its business and assisted in doing that in terms of the measures that we're bringing in and that were approved by government today, but were announced, as you know, as part of the 750 million package. And they will mean a lot for hauliers. They'll mean a lot for people who transport goods and services. And also it'll mean a lot for fishers, for example, who need support and need help. Farmers and indeed contractors, and in the general public through the reduction in excise duties itself. You must realise that before the war, way back in February, the Minister Dáil O'Brien announced a significant overhaul of the retrofitting schemes and an expansion of them, increased grants for attic and cavity wall insulation, additional attic insulation top-up grant for first-time buyers, attic and cavity wall insulation, social second wall measure, new grant for energy-efficient windows and doors, expanded heat pump systems grant, totaling now €12,500, and on and on. And the results of all of that is that about 29,000 people have applied in the first quarter alone, which is a substantial increase, I think, on last year. And so there's very good feedback from his approach, strategic approach, to the whole energy saving and insulation and so on, which has been quite significant over the last number of years in terms of the impact it has had on thousands and thousands of households across the country. And I agree with you, that is one of the more effective ways to cushion people and to help people to bear the brunt of what are very, very serious increases in energy costs.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Batchik.
Well, Taoiseach, I absolutely acknowledge that the energy shock, the particular energy crisis that we are now in, is of course caused by international events, in particular by Trump and Netanyahu's illegal war on Iran. And I think we're all conscious of that. It's how we respond that's the question. And two things. First, you acknowledge systemic change is needed. I think you did in your response to me. Absolutely, I agree. We need to change the way we work, we change the way we do business, change our reliance on fossil fuels. So we need that renewables revolution, and you didn't respond on that. And yes, it's welcome to see measures in retrofitting, but the upfront costs of fitting solar panels, for example, of installing heat pumps, these are massive for households, and there's far too little available. And the rollout of renewables, of our capacity to generate through onshore and offshore wind, far too slow. And we from opposition have supported efforts by government to speed up the pace, but we're seeing so little being done on what should be a huge, huge thing for us, the rollout of offshore and onshore wind generating capacity. And the second thing to say, Taoiseach, is that there are consequences to rolling out continuous series of support measures. People are not sure what's going on, they lack certainty, they lack clarity, and they are really concerned about how to pay for basics in this cost of living crisis.
I wouldn't agree with you that it's too slow, Deputy. When you look at the response to the measures that Deputy O'Brien announced in February, I mean, over 1,730 applications for attic insulation. That's up 81% year on year. Over 1,000 applications for cavity wall installation, up 62%. 350 applications for heat pump installations, up 95%. 7,000 applications for window and door upgrades. It's a new grant. Over 10,000 applications for solar PV. That's up 65% year on year. And over 1,500 homes at risk of energy poverty upgraded under the Warmer Home Scheme to the end of March at an average cost per home of 31,000. That's up 18%. 900 heat pumps installed to the end of March. New grant for first-time buyers, 225 active applications. And new energy poor grants for attic and cavity wall, again, significant numbers. So essentially, the revamp of this scheme and the overhaul of the scheme has resulted in a very, very significant increase in the numbers applying,
Thank
which
you,
means it's
Taoiseach.
responding
Time is
to
up.
the need.
Deputy Holly Cairns.
Ceann Comhairle, at the outset, I want to acknowledge the passing of Councillor Joe Carroll on Friday. He was an exceptionally helpful and supportive towards me when I first entered into politics. That's the kind of person he was and the kind of person that will be missed in Skibbereen and beyond. And my thoughts are with Sheila and Linda and Kieran and Anna. Taoiseach, 8 years ago, Ireland voted to repeal the 8th Amendment, to take abortion access out of the Constitution and into the hands of the legislators in this House. It was the culmination of decades of campaigning by committed activists all across the country. Many people across this House, including yourself, were part of that referendum campaign. I know from my experience in West Cork, canvassing the stories from women late on in pregnancy who were forced to travel abroad to have terminations for medical reasons, were the stories that stuck in people's minds and hearts the most. Women who, in the midst of grief and trauma, chose to speak publicly, to share deeply personal experiences. They spoke about receiving devastating diagnoses. They spoke about being told they could not receive care in their country. They spoke about the loneliness of travelling, leaving behind their families, their support networks, their homes at one of the most painful moments in their life. And they spoke about stigma and shame where there should have been compassion and care. They told their stories for a simple reason, so that what happened to them would not happen again. 8 years ago, Ireland listened to those women and voted to repeal the 8th. 3 years ago, the Maria O'Shea report was published, a report which was baked into the initial legislation and commissioned by your government. This report found that the law is not working as it should. It recommended clear, practical changes, removing the mandatory 3-day waiting period, ending the criminalisation of doctors, and providing clarity so that women facing fatal fetal diagnoses can access care here at home. But since then, little has changed. Every year, approximately 240 women are still forced to travel to the UK to access abortion care. Many of those women are travelling because they've received a devastating diagnosis, often after their 20-week scan. Like Denise Whitmore, whose story I raised with you a few weeks ago. Taoiseach, we can't ask women to share their stories over and over again and not take action. We cannot stand over a system that continues to send women abroad at their most vulnerable moment.
Taoiseach will respond.
8 years ago, the public voted for compassionate approach
Time is
to
up,
abortion
Deputy.
care. 3 years ago, the
Taoiseach will
report was
respond,
published.
Deputy Cairns.
Today, I'm introducing
Prepare in
to
time.
close them.
Your
Will you
time is
support
up.
this legislation?
Taoiseach will respond.
First of all, I thank the Deputy for raising this issue, and the Government is committed to ensuring that there is safe and equitable access to termination of pregnancy services. And significant steps have been taken in this regard, including the expansion of hospital services, the introduction of safe access zones, and the continuation of the revised model of care for termination in early pregnancy. And these measures have substantially reduced barriers and have increased access to services for those who need it. And given that there is a broad spectrum of sincerely held opinion on the issue of legislative change, proposals in this regard do require careful consideration. Now, there was a referendum, as you said, on the 8th Amendment, and termination of pregnancy services came into operation on January the 1st, 2019. And as you say, a review of the Act was completed in 2023. Significant progress has been made in relation to implementing the operational recommendations arising from the review. Termination services in early pregnancy up to 12 weeks are now provided in all 19 maternity hospitals. That wasn't the position some years ago. There has also been a sustained increase in community providers, which currently stands at 491. And furthermore, the revised model of care introduced in response to the COVID pandemic is approved as the enduring model of care. and it's possible now for one of the 2 consultations required for termination in early pregnancy to take place remotely. You're aware of the safe access zones legislation coming into account. And overall, the held regulation of termination of Pregnancy Act 2018 is consistent with commitments given to the Irish people prior to the repeal of the 8th Amendment. That said, there is a broad range of sincerely held opinion on the issue of legislative changes to that Act. It is important that all voices are heard, that we have a respectful debate and discussion on this, that we listen to each other with a view to achieving the maximum consensus possible before proceeding with change. And I think your legislation will give an opportunity for that to happen in the House. And I've spoken to the Minister in respect of this, and the Minister will engage constructively with the legislation that you will be bringing into the House for date, because I think ultimately you will be calling for ministerial guidelines in your legislation to arbitrate on, or not arbitrate is the wrong word, but to guide clinicians in respect of fatal fetal abnormality, which is an issue in the context of some of those who are travelling out of the country to have terminations. Not all cases. And then there's the 3-day wait and other issues that are in the legislation which do need to be discussed.
Thank you,
if we learned anything from the referendum, it was that
Deputy
there was
Kearns will respond.
Sustained discussion here in the House.
Deputy Kearns, please.
Which facilitated
Taoiseach, time is up.
Subsequently happened.
Deputy Kearns.
Taoiseach, I appreciate your engagement on the issue and the Minister for Health, and that you've spoken to her on this. It sounds like the government is willing to constructively engage, and I think that's really important given the trauma that so many people are still going through. What I would appeal to people on all sides of the House today is to please allow this to second stage, to at least allow it to be debated. I think there's an argument that's often made in this House and beyond that because we voted on particular legislation that it simply can't be changed, that that's what the public voted on. And I just don't think that that argument stands up to scrutiny. The voting public know legislation does change, can be improved, and it's our job to do that. A review was baked into the legislation too, and the public voted on that. So I thank you for your cooperation, and I'll just ask again if you will be supporting the passage of the bill.
Thank you, Deputy Taoiseach, please.
Well, on this side of the House, as you know, it's a vote of conscience on matters of this nature. In life or death matters, it's a vote of conscience, so we'll examine the legislation. There will be debate around that area of fatal fetal abnormality. There was significant debate around that at committee stage in advance of the referendum, and indeed during the referendum itself. And I think there's a desire in many people that we have to maintain faith with the amendment and the debate around the changes that occurred and that were debated during the referendum itself. So we always, I think everyone facilitates debate in the House, at least should, from first stage into second stage. And I think we should allow people to examine the bill in detail and come to their positions on it.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Michael Collins.
Thank you, Ceann-Comhairle. Taoiseach, I want straight answers today on the delay and the disorder surrounding the short-term letting and tourism bill. The general scheme was approved by government last April, yet here we are again with no bill published, no final planning guidance and no clarity for the people whose livelihoods are directly affected. At the same time, tens of thousands of small family-run accommodation providers, many of them in rural and coastal communities that we represent and indeed across the whole of Ireland, are still being told they must be ready to comply with new rules by the 20th of May 2026. They are being asked to plan their futures, their homes and their businesses without seeing a single line of the law they are supposed to comply with. Taoiseach, that is not good governance. Can you explain to this House why the bill has still not been published? I raised this issue on numerous times with you and with others, and you still went ahead and rammed through the Presidential Tenancies Amendment Act 2025. I've highlighted over and over again since then that this bill will destroy smaller rural family businesses across the whole western seaboard. You are trying to make criminals of ordinary, decent taxpayers. The Tourism Committee did do pre-legislative scrutiny in January, and I attended and spoke at it. I pleaded with your government to use common sense. The report still is not published. I've asked for a full debate on the issue every week since then at the Business Committee and here on the floor of the Dáil to no avail. Last Tuesday I put down a topical issue on the matter. Neither the Senior Minister nor any of his two sidekicks could come into the House to debate the issue. Instead, I got a well-worn stock answer delivered by a random Junior Minister who appeared to lack a good grasp of the issue. The papers today are reporting that the whole scheme is being kicked back to the summer or beyond. Yet I can't get a straight answer here in the House. There are rumblings of backbench division on this issue. Well, Taoiseach, if recent history has taught you anything, my advice would be that you sit up and listen to this on this one. If not to me, then to those sitting behind you. You must not force families out of business for a foolish notion that you will free up thousands of properties for rental markets. Or is the idea to fleece them for the thousands in compliance fees while flushing a good-going element of the rural economy down the toilet? So I will ask you, Taoiseach, will you confirm for the House that the registration deadline of May 20th is dead in the water? Confirm when the legislation will be published. Commit not to ram it through the House without proper debate and consideration of opposition amendments. And will you consider making the accommodation I have repeatedly asked for, that the established operators are treated with respect and granted a planning exemption in order to comply with Fáilte Ireland registration?
Thank you, Deputy Taoiseach, please.
Deputy, first of all, no one is wiping anybody out in rural Ireland. I mean, it suits you to create the storm and to have rooms in saying the government's going to do this, the government's going to do that. Everyone in this House, by the way, let's get the background to this, were agreed that housing was the #1 priority, or at least I thought it was, the #1 priority facing this Dáil at the commencement of the Dáil. And so the objective in terms of the short-term legislation is actually to get more houses back into the rental market. Now, what the policy decision we've taken, which you're well aware of, is that it relates to towns over 20,000. So that excludes straight away all of the Western Seaboard, Northwestern Seaboard, all the way along. We're looking at towns and cities above 20,000 people. Now, planning law is planning law. Okay? The 7-year rule is there. Basically, if you're operating an Airbnb for 7 years, you don't need planning permission, is my understanding. It's my layperson's articulation of it, but essentially, it would be great difficulty in enforcing anything on you at that stage. I'm sure you'll accept that. I mean, you're wily enough now in terms of the planning issues as they affect people, so I'm sure you'd agree that's the position. Now, there is an EU directive governing this as well. And that's governing all of Europe. And so we do in the cities want less of the short-term let, we want more housing. Because we do need more housing for younger people. Because people are arguing about the rents being high. We need more supply. And there's an issue there. And I think you should acknowledge that. It's not a foolish idea. There's a logic behind it. And there's rationale behind it. So the fundamental objective is to continue to support tourism in those areas where tourism is a key industry. And that's all along the Western Seaboard, Southwest, the West and the Northwest, and along the East Coast, Southeast Coast, and so on like that. So they're all well below the 20,000 threshold. And the idea is to balance the need for long-term housing supply, greater housing availability, whilst also protecting rural and regional tourism and jobs. And the National Register is to be compiled by Fáilte Ireland for short-term let providers. It's to be established by Fáilte Ireland. And there are, so the issue is still being examined at government in terms of the planning statement and so on, and how to enable people to adjust to the situation, that the policy position that we've identified and announced.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Minister, Deputy Collins.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Taoiseach, for your reply. You says I create a storm. This has been talked about for 2 years, and you can't. Mother of God, sorry, they're ringing me from West Cork. Sorry, you're talking about creating a storm. This is a serious storm for the people that are facing a crisis at this moment. That they're talking about signing up to something on the 20th of May. It's like if you have a checkbook there in the morning and you sign your name, but you just give a blank check. Are people going to have to sign up on the 20th of May to a blank check? That's what we're asking. All they're asking for is clear guidelines as to what is going ahead. Are they going to have to sign up to something that they don't know what they're signing up to? It's no point in you saying here that this might be the way or that might be, and that's the way you see it, the way other people out there, I'm not in the business, but the other people out there see it totally and utterly different. And what they want is clarity, and that clarity should have been here months and months previous to this. We should be debating this in the Dáil, agree or disagree, and go forward, and that isn't.
But when the government is a final position, there will be plenty of opportunity for debate in the Dáil, plenty of opportunity. We're not rushing anything in, we're not going to ram anything through. And as I say, and just you need to be clear as well, always, long before any of this happened, change of use always required planning. You know that. Now you're pretending that the government has suddenly invented that. We haven't. You have, no, you've been around meetings, you're on Facebook every second night, a meeting here and a meeting there, a meeting here and a meeting there, and you're saying government's going to bring in this draconian law about change of use. Like, change of use has always been there. But look, we're very conscious and have been of the need to protect regional tourism, rural Ireland, and the jobs that go there. That's why we took the population threshold of 20,000. And we will be back to you, Deputy.
Thank you. And that concludes. Now we move in accordance with Standing Order 35, and I now call on the Chief Whip, Mary Butler, to move the arrangements for this week's business. Chief Whip.
I move.
Thank you. Are the proposed arrangements for this week's not agreed? Deputy McLaughlin, 30 seconds, Deputy.
We had the Taoiseach at the weekends talking about his department officials looking at more heat pumps. I mean, how out of touch can you be? People need money in their pockets now. So we need statements on an emergency mini-budget. You have the proposals for Sinn Féin, permanent cut to the USC, the energy credit restored, the cut to fuel and diesel at the pumps. We need this House to represent what people are going through out there. We need a reality check on government. So I'm calling for statements on an emergency mini-budget.
Deputy Conor Sheehan.
We're waiting the bones of a decade for the government to take meaningful action on short-term lets. Where is the bill? Where are the guidelines? When are we going to see the national planning statement? And will the register definitely be enforced for the previous May deadline that was agreed? We need to have a debate on this.
Deputy Sinead Gibney.
We've been talking, this government has been talking about short-term let since 2022 and the regulations that were required. I might not share the same position as Deputy Collins on it, but I do share his concerns about fresh delays arising today out of Cabinet disagreement over it. And this is in the context where in some counties there are 25 times as many short-term lets as there are properties available on the private rental market. We need a debate about this issue and it to be resolved. And
Deputy Richard Boyd Barrett. Taoiseach, sorry. Deputy Richard Boyd
Taoiseach, 700 workers at Dáil, a major contractor for Meta, that incidentally made 26 million profits in last year, have been told their jobs are gone. This is on top of 300 before that. They can't work for 6 months because of what Meta require. And they're getting no redundancy, the vast majority of them. So they are looking to meet you and the Senior Minister, and I think we need to discuss their plight because their jobs have been replaced by the AI that they trained.
Thank
so
you,
more job losses
Deputy
of this
Michael Collins. Deputy Michael Collins.
Thank you. Taoiseach, I think we need a very serious discussion here in the Dáil about the mental health and the mental health services in this country. I see quite a lot of centres closing down, beds being lost. I think it's a serious issue that needs discussion. I asked for it some time back and it hasn't happened. So I'd appreciate maybe we debate it this week.
Chief Whip to respond.
Ceann, as you know, during the Business Committee meeting last Thursday, there was very few issues with the order of business. There was a request for additional time. It was facilitated. All issues raised here today can be discussed, but I do recall it was, I think, only Deputy Collins raised the order of short-term lists last Thursday. And in relation to the mental health, I'll be here in the Dáil tomorrow for another 4 hours. That will bring to 38 hours the amount of time given to discuss the mental health bill over the last few weeks. So you're more than welcome, Deputy, to attend.
Thank
the order
you.
of business stands.
Are the proposed arrangements for this week's business agreed to? Not agreed. Deputies in favour say Tá. Deputies against say Neil. The question is carried. Thank you, deputies. We now move on to the private vote on. I did. 10-minute bells, deputy.